Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this year. Too bad it's all online. My name is Mark Goldie, and I'm joined with Ailey Lewis. We're both representing the Professional Geoscientists Ontario today. We want to keep this as loose as we can. I like to put the flyer up first just to show, does everybody see that and hear me okay?
Yep, coming through clear.
Yep.
Thanks. Okay. The greatest thing about this flyer to me is just the bullet points on the left. The reason we're doing this is really just to provide some information on what it takes to become a professional geoscientist in Ontario. The steps, why geoscientists are regulated, what geoscientists actually do, and the benefits of becoming a student member. And that's the one we'd like to emphasize. We really encourage students to join as early as they can. And we'll show you a bit about what that's all about. So as I introduced the two of us, so Ailey is actually on staff with the PGO. She does all the hard work. I'm a volunteer, and I'm a member of council, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. So a little bit about what the Professional Geoscientists of Ontario are all about. It's a licensing and regulatory body responsible for all of Ontario's geoscientists. You may have seen some things in literature and online with the acronym of the organization. We've moved on to just PGO now for a few reasons. But you might see APGO listed in some places on documents or whatever, but that's just a legal thing. So the PGO really consists of various committees and a council who oversee regulation of geoscientists. So here's a picture of the core staff of the PGO. So there's a CEO, a registrar, assistant registrar, and office manager. I think I missed one, Ailey, but you can help me with that.
Yeah, there's Marilyn, who's the Director of Stakeholder Relations, and then we have Bernard Kratchen, who's our Communications Specialist, does a lot of the website work. He's not in the picture because he wasn't there on the day. It's also a bit of an old picture, but
yeah. So it's a lean team, but they do a lot of work.
Yep.
And yeah, we rely on very heavily.
Just before you keep on going, we can see your next slide. So maybe if you've got the, like just the, I don't know, whatever display. I think if you go display settings, and then swap presenter view. There we go. We're all good.
That's better?
Yep.
Okay. So as I said, this is the staff, and there's a 20-person or so council. Half of them are elected, and half of them are appointed by various government bodies and things like that. So we're all volunteers on the council. It's for a 3-year term, and I'm about 1 year into a 3-year term. And I represent Central Ontario. So the role of the PGO, in a nutshell, is their role is to protect the public by regulating the geoscience profession in the province. And they safeguard the integrity and advances of the professional practice. So that's pretty straightforward. So I'm not sure I need to expand on that too much. But why is geoscience in Ontario regulated? So it's to protect the public and the environment, and to protect the Canadian economy by safeguarding the public's confidence in Canada's resource sector, which is a big chunk of our GDP. And really, the PGO was started about 20 years ago in 2000, basically as a result of a couple scandalous activities that were geoscience related. One was a mining kind of venture, and one was the Walkerton water kind of disaster that you may have read about in in your studies. So those are the two big reasons why PGO was started. So the actual membership or licensees is around 3,500 people in Ontario. And you can see how it's broken down. So a good 2/3 of them are full practicing professional geoscientists. And the balance is rounded out by students like yourselves, which is a pretty big chunk, 427 members as of September. Geoscientists in training, which is the next step before you become a full practicing member. So these would be graduates that are actually working. Non-practicing PGOs, which is about 6%, and then another category called limited. So that's a pretty good summary of who's who and where they sit with the membership. So why become a professional geoscientist? So this is the part where Alien will kind of give a little bit of background of where we come from, and then Alien will take over and get to the meat of the presentation. So myself, I'm a geophysicist by profession. I've been working in industry for about 30 years. I mostly worked in mineral exploration in various parts of the world. I went to Western for undergraduate, did a BSc in geophysics, and then I did a master's in mineral exploration at Queen's a few years after that. But those 30 years have been mixed, working for mid-size mining companies, which that's where I work for now as the chief geophysicist for IAMGOLD. And I've worked for major companies. I've worked as a consultant and as a geophysical contractor. And those kind of various jobs have taken me around living in South America and the US, and then working in Asia and a bit in Europe and South America, and of course, North America. So it's taken me around the world that way. I've been a member of the PGO for about 5 years. And the reason for that is I did spend most of my time outside of Ontario until about 7 years ago. So, and as I said, I've been a member of the council representing Central Ontario for about a year, and there'll be about 2 more years on my term.
Okay, I guess it's my turn now. So I guess I'll give you a bit of my background as well. So I graduated with my BSc in Earth Sciences in 2006 from the University of Glasgow. I then moved to Canada to do my master's degree at Laurentian University in Sudbury. My project was based on volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits in Flin Flon in northern Manitoba, where I did a variety of different kind of topics for the master's. So I learned a lot of different skills, one of which was learning how to drive a boat. And I thoroughly enjoyed the work, so I wanted to pursue a career in exploration. I worked in various roles during my master's during the summers, but unfortunately discovered I'm quite allergic to insects, so I had to rethink my options. I then found a job as a mine geologist in Sudbury, where I learned a whole lot of different skills, but was also able to use what I had learned during my exploration experience, including being able to do mapping, which is one of the things I love most about geology. So I then moved to another company in Sudbury where I was a production geologist and open pit. Once again, a new learning curve, but being able to take some of the same skills with me. Then unfortunately, the pit got mined out and it was time to move on. So at that point, I spent 2 years teaching structural geology at Cambrian College in Sudbury before we made the move to the GTA, where I was employed by PGO. So I've been with PGO for about 1.5 years now. And my hope is that my experiences in exploration and mining will help me and help everybody, especially some of you guys, to understand that it doesn't matter where you start out, your skills are transferable. Learn what you can, take advantage of every opportunity you possibly can, and enjoy yourself along the way. Because as you can see from some of these pictures, I had a lot of fun in my younger days. Okay, yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so now you know a bit about what we are and how we got where we are. How do you become a professional geoscientist? So start by becoming a student member, which is free. All you have to do is go to our website and sign up. You can sign up to receive our newsletter, which is called Field Notes, and it comes out once a week, and it'll keep you up to date with what's going on with PGO and bits and pieces from other parts of the industry. So as a student member, you can also sign up for the mentoring program, which we'll tell you a little bit more about later. And we also have a knowledge requirements toolkit that you can download and use to help you keep track of your progress throughout your degree to make sure you complete all of the required courses before you graduate. So I'll tell you more a little bit about the knowledge requirements in a bit. Okay, next slide, please. So what do you need to do to apply? So first of all, you need to graduate with a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree in an area of geoscience. After graduation, you can apply to become a geoscientist in training or a GIT. If you apply within 6 months of graduation, the first year of dues is free. I noticed a typo in there now. It says fee, it's supposed to be free. But you do still have to pay the application fee. So for example, if you were to graduate in June and apply immediately, the dues for the remainder of that year would be free. And our dues are charged per calendar year, just for information. Okay, next slide, please. So once you're a GIT, you have completed the hardest parts of the process, which is meeting the knowledge requirements, which I will tell you about next. So as a GIT, you need to work under the supervision of a professional geoscientist or a professional engineer who is qualified to do geoscience work for a minimum of 4 years. This does not have to be completed consecutively. We do understand that there are times of unemployment, contracts run out, and it can be difficult to find work again. So if you work during summer months while studying for your undergraduate degree, you can earn up to 12 months of experience for any geoscience work after your second year of your undergraduate degree. So I would recommend that while you're studying, keep track of all of your work experience as you go, so that it's easier to write up when you come to submit your application. So if you decide to go on to further education, you'll be awarded 12 months of experience for completion of a geoscience master's degree and a further 12 months of experience for completion of a geoscience PhD. So once you've earned your four years of experience, you'll then be eligible to apply for change of designation from a GIT to a professional geoscientist. Next slide, please. So now that you've got an overview of some of the steps to becoming a PGO, we're going to go back to the beginning and I'll tell you about the knowledge requirements, which is probably the part that you're here to hear about. So normally we'd bring a stack of booklets with us when we give these presentations, but we can't do this year. So on this presentation, there's a link to download a PDF copy, which I can also send to your organizer to pass out as needed. So the booklet is called Geoscience Knowledge and Experience Requirements for Professional Registration in Canada, and it's written by Geoscientist Canada. And this is the basis of registration for every jurisdiction in Canada. So whether you do your degree in Ontario, but then end up moving to, for example, British Columbia, the requirements are exactly the same. So what are the basic requirements for registration? As I mentioned before, you'll need to complete a 4-year BSc degree in an area of geoscience. Then we use a knowledge requirements table to make sure that all the basic knowledge requirements are fulfilled. The table is made up of 5 groups where there are a minimum of 27 educational units which are needed to fill the requirements in each of the 5 groups. And one educational unit is equal to 1 semester university course. So if, for example, you do a first-year chemistry course, but it's a full year course, we can use that towards 2 educational units. Okay, next slide, please. So the knowledge requirements are divided into 3 streams. We've got geology, environmental geoscience, and geophysics. Within these streams, there's 5 groups. 1A is composed of compulsory foundation science courses. 1B are additional foundation science courses. Then we go into 2A, which is the compulsory foundation geoscience courses, followed by 2B, which are additional foundation geoscience courses, and then 2C, which are other geoscience courses. So basically your electives. Next slide, please. So sections 1A, 1B, and 2A are the same for all streams and will form the basis of a geoscience degree. Sections 2B and 2C are where you can specialize in one of the streams. So once you get to section 2B, the geophysics stream cannot be used with the other 2 streams. This is because if you pursue a geophysics specialty, it requires a different knowledge base. And I believe it's a lot more maths and physics related than a regular geoscience degree. So there's quite a lot of overlap between geology and environmental sciences. So we have no problems being able to use both of those streams with each other. Next slide, please. Okay, so sections 1A and 1B are pretty straightforward and are in the foundation science courses, usually completed in 1st or 2nd year. Section 1A requires chemistry, calculus, and physics, and section 1B requires 6 courses out of biology, chemistry, computer programming, maths, physics, or statistics. Now, you don't have to take all 6 of these, but you can only have a maximum of 2 courses per subject. So for example, you could do 2 biology courses, 2 chemistry courses, and 2 physics courses to complete section 1B. Next slide, please. Okay, so section 2A is where we get into the foundation geoscience courses, which must be at a 2nd year level or higher. These courses are mandatory and are the same for everyone and are considered to make up the foundation of geoscience knowledge. So the courses are field techniques, mineralogy and petrology, sedimentation and stratigraphy, and structural geology. Next slide, please. So section 2B looks like the bottom of the table got a little bit cut off there, but it's all good. It's in the knowledge requirement booklet. So section 2B is still considered to be foundation geoscience, but here there's a bit more choice as you start to decide which discipline you want to work in. So this is where anybody considering a geophysics specialty will have to ensure to complete the courses offered only in the geophysics stream. So here you need to complete 5 courses out of a choice of 6. For geology and environmental sciences, a total of 5 courses must be taken with a maximum of 2 courses per subgroup and only 1 course per subject. So subgroup 1 is geochemistry and geophysics. Subgroup 2 consists of all the petrology courses, hydrogeology, hydrology, and engineering geology. And subgroup 3 is sedimentology, glacial geology, geomorphology, soil science, remote sensing, or GIS. Again, all courses in this section must be at 2nd year level or higher. Next slide, please. So the final section is section 2C. Here you need to complete a minimum of 9 courses at 2nd year level or higher. And it covers a wide range of topics. So instead of putting out a table of pages and pages worth of different topics, I decided not to do that this year, and it's not an exhaustive list. So it's basically your electives. There are a lot of courses and they're not all on the list. So with section 2B, as with the previous section, geophysics stream cannot overlap with geology or environmental. So as I said before, this is not an exhaustive list, and the final decision of the suitability of a course rests with our PGO registration committee. So the geoscience booklet I mentioned earlier will provide you with this list, as will the knowledge requirements toolkit. So yeah, I didn't want to give you all of these lists after lists because it's a lot of information to take in that you can find elsewhere. Okay, I think that about wraps up my section. So we're going back to Mark again.
Yep, so just to wrap up with a couple of slides. So there are a number of benefits of student membership. It is free, so remember that, not a fee. So you can track your progress online, make sure you're in the required courses. Geo staff, people like Ailey are always willing to answer questions and offer advice, and any questions you have, they get back to you pretty quickly about anything you have to ask. It's a way to connect with professional geoscientists through networking events, and and then you can become involved in the PGO mentoring program, which would put a mentee with a mentor in a mutual kind of beneficial agreement way. And then you can sign up for the latest information from a Fields Notes newsletter, which is put out weekly. So that newsletter, the front of the newsletter is on the left. So it just has tidbits from the geoscience, what goes on with geoscience in Ontario, as I said, on a weekly basis. In this case, you can see there's a qualified person short course being offered coming up on November 21st by one of the counselors called David Lang, and he does a really good job in showing what you need to do to report your publications in the province of Ontario. It's a really helpful workshop to take. And on the right, there's some upcoming webinars which are free by people, professional geoscientists in the community, and sometimes people on council and things like that. But you can see there's one coming up about insurance programs for people that practice geoscience in Ontario. And the one at the bottom right is about reporting, mining disclosures, 43-101s, things that are really important and used widely in the mining industry. So, and you can see some of these webinars, historical ones are online, and you can watch them, that ones that have happened in the past, and workshops and other information like that. So there's a long list of reasons to become a student member, and we'd encourage everybody who's listening today to consider if they think they're going to practice geoscience in Ontario in the future. So you've heard enough of me anyways. We'd love to answer any questions verbally. By audio would be better. And if you can, just give us an idea, maybe what year you're in and what you're taking. I wouldn't mind getting a breakdown of everybody who's listening today, kind of what stream they're on. So with that in mind, we'd love to pass it back to the host.
Yeah, so I don't have any questions asked in chat, obviously, right now. Oh, actually, we do have one by Thanuka. They ask, what are some examples of placements that you have done while doing the 4-year GIT?
I'm not sure I follow the question. Do you, Ailey?
Well, I mean, it's not, you're not really doing placements as a GIT. Yeah. You're a GIT while you're working. So it really depends on what kind of work you want to go into. Like if you're in the environmental stream, you can, whatever company hires you, you're a GIT for them and you work underneath a professional geoscientist. For me, I worked in the mining industry. I did core logging, I did drilling, I did exploration. So it really, I mean, you can do so many different things as a GIT.
But I think the role of the PGO not to give people work, not to put people in placement for their GIT. That's, if I understand the question right, you do that on your own. You get your own jobs, and is that what I understand?
That's how I understood the question too. Yeah. What are some entry-level placements that you have seen though when coming right out of school?
Oh,
could be anything.
My personal, I mean, when I came out of school 3 decades ago, I what I did is I took the Northern Miner, which is a newspaper, with a fresh degree in geophysics, and I started from the bottom in the alphabetical order. Took the first 10 contracting companies that were doing geophysical surveys, sent my resume, and got my job, and that's where it started. So I mean, there's so many different things you can do with degrees, geophysics or geology or geochemistry, but getting in the field, if you're, whether it's environmental or geology or geophysics, whatever stream, getting in the field's a fun thing to do and a great place to start.
Yeah, I spent a summer with the Ontario Geological Survey in 2009 during my master's. So it was a 4-month program. You learn a lot, and the Geological Survey is a really good place to hone your skills, especially mapping, if you like that kind of thing. But they have like the sedimentary side as well. So they do more about, I think it's like soil sampling and surveying and things like that. But yeah, there's so many opportunities. You just have to go out and start applying.
Absolutely. So we have a little bit of a question of clarification by Tanisha. Would you recommend completing, or no, from Thanuka, sorry, on her last question. I'm a bit confused. When you do your GAT, you apply for places yourself and keep track of what you did for the 4 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then Tanisha asks, would you recommend completing a master's degree right after graduating, or would it be better to get some work experience first?
That's a very personal question because for me, if I didn't do a master's as soon as I graduated, there's no way in hell I would go back to university. So
I'm kind of the opposite because I, leaving school, I couldn't wait to work. It depends on what industry you're going into and what the cycle is like, because sometimes it's really tough to get a job, and that directs a lot of people to graduate work. But I think if times are pretty good and the work's out there, take advantage of that. In my case, I took advantage of a layoff several years into my career. I went back and did a master's, and it was just that kind of reasoning was the time to do that. So it depends, as Bailey said, depending on what you prefer. But I mean, if times are good and there's a lot of work, I wouldn't pass that up coming out of school.
We have a question from Marcelina. You talked about the mentoring program. Would this be done during your undergrad? Is it normally for 4th years, or what do you think?
it's open to anybody. You have to be a member. So if you're doing your undergrad and you're a student member, you can easily apply to be mentored by a seasoned professional. You can also apply as a GIT, as long as you're a member. Now, I will say that it's not guaranteed. It's not a job thing. It's to get advice from people who've been in the world and been around for a bit, and to help you with any questions you might have to understand where you want to go. So it is not to help you find work.
And you can do it however you feel comfortable doing it. You will get a summary of people that are available to be mentors, and you can anonymously look at that and figure out if there's some connection or some interest, and then you can decide whether you want to just do this online, phone calls. Pre-COVID, you probably could have met if you wanted to, but yeah, it's entirely up to you how you feel comfortable in working with your mentor.
So we have another question from Thanuka. What are some good volunteer opportunities for undergrad students to take part in right now that you are aware of?
It's a tough one, volunteer.
Yeah, I mean, PDAC isn't happening next year. That usually takes a lot of student volunteers. The Prospectors and Developers Conference in Toronto in March, but they're going virtual this year, so I'm not sure if they even we'll need volunteers this year or not. I mean, as a student, I don't really know.
Yeah, that's a good. We haven't received a question before.
No.
Good question. We'll have to be better prepared for that one. The next
I
one.
do.
Yep.
That it would be very limited.
Besides the PDAC, I can't really think of anything offhand either.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you guys do ever think of anything, then feel free to send us an email, and we'll update people with that. But I do imagine COVID has things very limited right now as well. From Charlotte, we have a question. I would love to hear about the different fields in geoscience and the respective jobs they may include.
That's another whole evening, I think. But wow. I mean, as a geologist, I mean, you could work in the oil patch, in environmental, in mineral exploration. Then you can branch off in mineral exploration to 6, 8, 10, 12 different commodities. And that's just as a geologist. And you're not a chemist and geophysics. So, I mean, it's pretty endless, I think. One neat thing you might want to do is go on the PGO website and look at the staff and counselors. There's a pretty wide range of representation there. There's 25, 26 people, but there's quite a few different industries that are represented in academia, and that's a whole different thing as well. So I mean, I can go on forever rattling off all the different types of geoscience, but maybe Ailey can just distill that a bit better.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. We have geomorphologists, we have hydrogeologists, we have geotechnical people, we have engineering geologists, or is it, yeah, geological engineers. Yeah, I mean, mining goes into resources or production. You've got core loggers, you've got drill people, you've got exploration people, you've got, yeah, and then you go into the oil patch. Then you've got the academic side. Some people continue to pursue degrees and go into postdoctorate degrees and then end up being teachers, so, or professors, I guess. Yeah, there's just like, there's so many different things you can do with a geoscience degree. You're not limited at all. You start to be slightly more limited once you gain experience in the workplace. But even then, as I said about myself, I went from exploration to mining to teaching to now being the assistant registrar at PGO. So, I mean, your skills are all transferable. But yeah, there's so many things you can do.
Yeah, geothermal, and then that story last week about the moon and the water. I mean, there was geologists working on that story last week about that asteroid that was being that they took a sample from. There's geologists and geophysicists working on that program. So I mean, as I said, we can rattle on forever about different applications.
Yep.
That's cool. We have a question from Tanisha. Can a high school course that we got university credit for count towards a knowledge requirement?
If the university has given you credit as a transfer credit, then yes. It must be listed on your university transcripts, but if it's there, then yep.
Cool. I have a question kind of along the lines that other people were asking. So I'm in environmental science specifically. I have taken geoscience courses before, but I think a lot of prospects that people look to, or like a major field of employment, is with the government. And I've heard in environmental sciences that having a master's really helps getting in with the government. as opposed to not having one, if that's where you're like looking to work. Is that true for geoscience too?
I know from my experience with the Ontario Geological Survey is they tend to like people with further degrees, but I mean, times are changing. And having the degree doesn't necessarily mean you're better than someone that doesn't. I've known a lot of people with further degrees that really shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But then I've known a lot of people without further degrees that do amazing work. So it's really, you know, it goes back to being a personal choice. Do you want to further specialize or don't you? If you're qualified for the work, then, I mean, okay, maybe if someone has a degree versus a person who doesn't, they might choose the person with the degree if everything else is equal. But even then, not necessarily. So I think it used to matter more than it does now, at least in my experience.
Mm-hmm. Great. Question from Eva. Is it important to know French to work in PGO? No.
Not a
Je ne
requirement.
comprends pas, parlez-vous anglais, s'il vous plaît?
No, not a requirement at all. No.
No, that's the only French phrase I know.
Do you guys find that other professional work requires French? Like, have you guys ever been called to work in Quebec or Montreal? In Canada?
I have a number of projects in Quebec right now, and you know, we're an international company, so our actual main language is English. But knowing French and working in Quebec is really important. Just like I have projects in South America, and you know, I lived there for a while, learned Spanish, and that helps a lot still this day. I worked in Brazil, and Portuguese helps there. I mean, everywhere you go, it helps. But in Quebec, if you know French, it's very helpful, but it's not critical for a lot of work. So.
Yeah, there are quite a number of drilling companies based in Montreal and other places in Quebec who their drillers and helpers don't speak English. Usually they have a foreman that does. So I've never come across that, but I know my husband has. He's a structural geologist in exploration, so he does know French. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing to have. I mean, if you've got it, great, but I wouldn't say it's something you really must have.
Cool. Question from Charlotte. How high are the employment demands for geoscientists?
Ebbs and flows. Environmental scientists are in big demand now. You know, in my world, mineral exploration, if you go to like a job site like Career Mine, which is kind of my bellwether, and you type in geologist, there's usually 100 plus openings at any given time. If you type geochemist, there's usually a handful. And if you type geophysicist, there's usually 0. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the demand is in the industry right now. A lot more demand for geologists, but there's a lot more positions for geologists. So I mean, that's kind of my kind of world right now. So
Yeah, and I think if you're willing to travel, then you're going to find it easier to find work than if you want to stay at home. There's a lot based, especially in Northern Ontario. So some of it will be fly in, fly out. Some of it will be rotations. Some of it might be residential. So depends on what you want to do.
So slightly unrelated question by Tanisha, but what led you guys into geoscience personally?
that's no, it's not unrelated. It happens to everybody. Usually a lot of people kind of stumble into it somehow. I can tell you what happened with me. I started off in engineering, civil engineering university, and was bored stiff up the first year, and went to the student directory and saw saw geophysics, and it looked like there was a lot of really interesting courses, and I switched there, and that's how I got into it.
Yeah, for me, I did geography at school and thoroughly enjoyed physical geography. My final year, I had a teacher who actually just graduated with her geology degree, and I didn't know that was a thing. So, but the more I talked to her, the more I found out about it. She recommended a course at Glasgow, and I applied. I got in, and the rest is history. So, but basically, I just love being outside and that kind of work. So it just fit until I discovered that Canada insects don't like me.
That's really cool. Question from Thanuka. I am planning on doing a double degree in geoscience and engineering. I haven't chosen what kind of engineering yet. What would you say would better complement getting a PGO, chemical or civil engineering, for example?
Mm.
That's a really interesting combination. So would you be a PGO, or would you be a PEng? How would that work? I don't know.
We have people can be both. You don't have to
Right,
be one or other.
right.
So, but yeah, that would involve a lot of work because you'd have to take all the geoscience courses and all the engineering courses to be able to get both designations. So, um, I mean, as far as PGO is concerned, if you meet the geoscience requirements,
Yeah,
then
so for my school, it's actually a bachelor's of environmental geoscience and then a master's of engineering. So I was just wondering, like, to have like that little foundation, like, is it better to have like maybe a civil, like, is that better complementing for, PGO compared to chemical? Like, what would you think?
as a master's degree, if you've met the requirements in your BSc, then it doesn't really matter. It's more what you want to go into when you graduate. I'm really not too familiar with chemical or civil engineering. So, I mean, I don't know, if you're looking at construction projects and things, then you're probably the geoscience background might be more appropriate. Um, I'm really not sure.
I'd say it's more of what you're interested more than what the PGO wants, and that
Yeah.
versus civil for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any more questions before we adjourn? I think the time is getting pretty close, but if you guys have any more questions, then do feel free to ask.
And you're welcome to email us at any time.
Tanisha says you mentioned you travel a lot. What's your favorite project that you worked on abroad?
I have two kids. It's like saying which one is my favorite kid. But I've had, yeah, I can't even begin to answer that one. There's been a lot of fun ones. Most fun ones are usually the ones that turn into mines. Years ago, I worked on a project in Armenia, and I was just at the time I was based in Peru, working on a certain type of gold deposit, gold system called a high sulfidation one. And I got to work on this brand new project in Armenia. And as soon as I got there, the rocks looked exactly the same as what I was working on in Peru. And you could see it. You could see it was going to become a mine. You could see it was that good. And 2 years ago, they did start to go into production. After it took 10 years. That's usually what happens in mine site. But that's pretty satisfying to see something like that at the inception. So I mean, there's a lot of people in the mining industry, exploration industry, have pretty good stories like that. So that would be my top of my list, I think.
I haven't really traveled a whole lot for work except Canada. Canada was my traveling. So.
Do you have a favorite project? Probably one that didn't involve bugs, right?
Yep. I think my favorite project would have been Broken Hammer, which is the open pit that I worked in Sudbury. Um, I love the mining aspect, but with the open pit, you're outside rather than stuck underground. So especially in the winter, when you're working underground, it's hard. You drive to work in the dark, you work in the dark, and you drive home in the dark, and not great for mental well-being. So at least in the pit, other than the minus 42-degree temperatures at the bottom of the pit in the middle of winter, which is not fun, that was definitely, I think, the highlight of my career up to this point. I met a lot of really good people I'm still in contact with of all different backgrounds. It helped that I was in charge of the pit and the mining, so that was good fun. Yeah,
cool.
yeah, it was good fun.
Thanuka wants to know if there's any projects that you worked on in GTA, and if you would tell her a little bit about it.
I haven't, this is my only GTA project, unless you involve like home renovations. So
Well, most of my career has been grassroots exploration. So none of that's been any scenario like the GTA. I mean, my office is in downtown Toronto, and that's where a lot of the collaboration happens in person with your peers and people you work with. But that's, desktop studies and things like that. But as far as field work, no, not for me. I mean, that's maybe the environmental engineering, environmental science part of it. That would kick in, I imagine.
yeah.
Very cool. Okay, well, that looks like, oh, we have one more question from Charlotte. What would you say is the research in geoscience currently focused on, and how much is there to discover in like the prospect of geoscience?
Well, the new buzz is AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning. That's been and using drones to fly surveys and taking pictures and doing geophysics, and so those are the two big things I've seen in the last year or two. Drones and AI. AI is going to be a big one, I think.
Definitely technological advances are the big thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, gold is always going to be a commodity that people go after. It's always got a good price. So, but yeah.
And then the mining part of it, I mean, a lot of the newer mines are going electric, and they're going automated without shovel drivers, and people are operating machines remotely and things like that that are on site. So I mean, that's on the mining part of it itself. That's happening right now.
Mhm.
Thanuka asks, how do we undergrads get involved in research in geoscience?
Talk to your professors.
Walk down the hall and talk to them.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised how many of them sometimes need somebody for 1 or 2 hours a week to help them digitize maps or run a couple of samples through a mass spec or something like that, they're your best bet for getting involved in research.
There's a trickle over to industry, because I was recently involved in a research project with industry, with a company that developed drone magnetometer surveying and university. So there's a three-way kind of research project. So the university part of it, they drove some of the testing in the field for this new drone mag system. I myself was involved with some of this, the planning and offering some data for comparison, like other types of data we could compare, a place to test the system. So that was a really good kind of research opportunity that went across, three different kind of disciplines, three different kind of places, which it worked really well. So everybody kind of benefited. But it starts across the hall with your professor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a master's seminar, which is kind of along that question, and a lot of the professors were just saying it's just familiarity and taking a leap of faith and just asking your professors. And yeah, oftentimes, as the lead was saying, there is something that's going on and they need people. They just need your name or your email and see that you're interested, and then everything goes from there.
Yeah, during my master's, I ended up doing some work for one of our profs at Sudbury. Was basically just digitizing maps, but you know, there's not just a digitizing project because you still get involved and you learn a little bit about what you're doing because you pay attention to what you're digitizing. It's not just mindless clicking. um, so there's lots of opportunities around the university, and you don't know until you ask. And especially if you find something that you're really interested in, we'll go and see that professor in particular, see what they have to offer. Even PhD students, master's students sometimes need a little bit of help here and there.
Very often too, I think there's a lot of field geoscience courses where you're working really closely with the professor in a small class. So in those cases, you know, that one-on-one or hands-on work can often translate into something that is, you know, a bigger research um, focus that you might be offered just by way of being in that field course. So,
Yep, can lead into your thesis for your final year or even a master's or a PhD project. You just don't know.
exactly.
And there's schools like Laurentian that are just getting piles of money for that purpose. They're always looking for students, PhD students, postdocs to help them with their to help use that money for research in all kinds of different disciplines. So I think they got like 100 million plus endowment recently at Laurentian. So money's out there if you're willing to do it. Yeah.
Charlotte is asking, how easily transferable are the professional geoscientist memberships?
Very, very easy. Once you are a PGO in any jurisdiction in Canada, all you have to do is apply as it's basically an agreement in transfer, but we just say, you know, you're transferring your membership. That doesn't mean you have to give up your membership in the other province. You're just transferring it's basically your references, your education, saying that this jurisdiction has accepted you, so we will now accept you based on their acceptance. So you pay the fee, you fill out a form, and you get your membership.
Yeah, it's really easy within Canada, but this last part of the question is in different parts of the world. Every place I worked, every country I worked, there wasn't any local kind of PGO type group. So that's easy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few, like Australia has something, the UK has something, but they're not the same. So it's not a case of get it in Canada and transfer it elsewhere. It's just if you need to get something in their country, then you have to go through their own processes.
But if you end up, you know, join the PGO, go through all that, and you end up working internationally, it's probably a good idea to hold on to your PGO if you can. Yeah.
That's what we have the non-practicing category for. It reduces your fee. You don't have to do the continuing professional development hours, but it means if you come back to Canada or back to practice, it's an easy transfer back to practicing again. So, or you just resign in good standing and then get reinstated within, I think it's 5 years, without too much hassle.
Tanuka is asking, other than the PDAC, are there any other events you know of that we students can attend to get more exposure to geoscience? So kind of like the volunteer question, but just any experience in general beyond that.
There's no shortage of conferences that have gone online. You know, one of the actual benefits of COVID, in my opinion, and nobody traveling, is I've actually attended a couple of conferences I wouldn't normally go to. One was in Chile last month. Another one's going to come up in, I think, Texas or something next month. So as far as that kind of professional development goes, those opportunities, there is no shortage of conferences. There's great ones in Australia, there's great ones in Europe that students can go, and the fees are usually low, if not free. So a little bit of searching might help if you have a specific kind of leaning, but that's been the kind of good thing now. I've been able to actually go to more in a way. It's not the same, but anyway.
And there's a lot of seminars and webinars and things going on online right now. I attend the Toronto Geological Discussion Group every 2 weeks. So, and if you guys are more environmental, there's the, oh, I can't remember what it stands for, but CREAM, it's up in Peterborough. I think they've gone online as well. But that's more of an environmental sort of type of talks. Ore Deposits Hub does another geology one, and these are all free. So, I mean, it's difficult to meet people right now and network, but if you listen to a talk, they always have discussions at the end. You can ask questions. They quite often provide email addresses if it's something you're really, really interested in. You can talk to the person directly later. So.
Charlotte is asking, what kind of work can we do related to geoscience without a PGO membership, if there is any?
You can sweep floors and no, I mean, Ailey's going to answer this way better than I can, but you can work without a PGO membership. But if you want to do anything like sign a report, especially if it's in the public eye, it's required. I mean, if you do have any, and then Ailey, maybe you can expand on that. I kind of butchered that.
Yeah, to practice geoscience, it's actually illegal to do so without being a professional geoscientist. So you'll get threatening letters. But technically you don't have to be a GIT. You can work towards your 4 years and then apply directly for professional registration. The reason we recommend getting your GIT first is so that you first of all know you've met all the knowledge requirements, and if you haven't, then you have time to get them. It also opens up a few doors for employment opportunities, because companies will see, okay, you're a GIT now, that means you're working towards your professional registration, and they know you're good to go. Whereas if you, like, it might stop you getting a job if somebody else already has theirs. But basically, you can't practice geoscience unless you're registered, and you can't sign reports.
Anuka asks, can you do your GIT while doing your undergrad, i.e. third or fourth year?
No, you have to have graduated with your undergraduate degree. But you can be a GIT and be a master's student, for example. I'm gonna have to turn some lights on in a minute. It's got dark.
I know, right? Charlotte says, very helpful, thank you. We do go till 7 o'clock, guys. For a second, I thought it was 6 o'clock. So totally open to any questions. But if we see that they're getting exhausted, then, you know, we'll definitely wrap up.
How many folks are still online?
We got just about the same amount. I think 1 or 2 might have left, but that might have also been people from EPSA just checking in on the event and making sure it's going.
Maybe Karen can answer this question. How many, I mean, of the 21 people online, two of them are us, but how many, what do you think the breakdown is of your kind of group as far as what they're studying right now in school?
I would say, so EPSA has a lot of disciplines. Michael, our president who spoke at the beginning, he's in chemistry, so it can range as far from chemistry as to physics, geoscience. I mentioned I'm in environmental science. So I would say because of that reason, there's some more popular disciplines than geoscience, if I'd have to guess. I would say maybe a fifth of us are in the area of geoscientists. A lot of us have studied geoscience before. I know a lot of people sometimes go back just to study geoscience, like after environmental science sometimes, or they try and do a master's in it. But yeah, that's probably the breakdown, a fifth. And we had from 10 to 20 people register for the event. So that kind of gives you an amount of numbers of how many people from our student union alone, were able to make it today. But we also have a really big department here at University of Toronto Scarborough. I find of the three campuses, Scarborough's is pretty big when it comes to geosciences, and I've had a lot of great professors that have taught classes like Earth Studies, Introduction to Geoscience, Earth History. We have a question from Tanuka, if I can turn it to her. What do people typically do their masters in that you know of?
Whatever takes your fancy.
It seems like people tend to do their masters, they kind of get steered into it somehow. I mean, they might have that one professor, an undergraduate that they like or certain subject. I mean, personally, when I was ready to do one, I mean, I did my undergraduate in geophysics, but geology is really fascinating me, the link between geophysics and geology. And I went and basically did a master's in geology. And that was a lot of fun and well worthwhile. So it depends on how you're feeling at the time, I think.
Yeah, for me, I wanted to leave home and I applied for master's programs in the south of England, in Sweden, and in Canada. And I guess I just talked to the guy here and he got to know me a little bit and found out what my interests were. At the time, I really enjoyed mapping and I wanted to do some sort of volcanology. So that's how I ended up doing volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits. So takes a little bit of the volcanology aspect, did a lot of mapping. Yeah, just kind of fell into it.
I
And
know a lot of geologists that have worked on a project and they work on a good project and they, really enjoy that project and they end up have field work to kind of start contributing towards their masters. And that's happened quite a bit. I've seen that.
yeah.
So they end up, working for a company, and then the company at times, because they're doing such good work, pays for their masters and helps them through it. So they don't miss much time working. So I mean I know a lot of geologists that have got their masters that way.
That's cool. Alid, how did you personally find those master's opportunities across seas or internationally? Because I know sometimes that can be hard to contact another country's universities and get in that way.
Yeah, this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I mean, I don't speak any other languages, which I have to say, coming to Canada, I've noticed how much how much I wish I'd paid more attention at school, basically. But at the time, I had to choose a country that did English speaking. So Sweden was one of them. I found the problem with different countries is they don't all offer funding. So it depends on, well, financial position is a big part of it. I got accepted at Sweden, but they didn't offer funding, but they had no fees. So I would have had to pay my own living costs. The same thing happened with the one in the south of England, in that they only offered half funding, so that would have covered my fees, but I still would have needed living costs. So my options for those two were defer for a year, work, save some money, and then go, which, knowing myself, I wouldn't have gone. And then I just happened to get in touch with the people in Sudbury and they offered me full funding. All I needed was the one-way plane ticket. So I think it also, other countries, I believe Australia is really hard to get into for master's programs. I think there's a lot of competition. So I think it depends on where you want to go. You've got to do your research and make sure it's a project you're really committed to. Because if you move to a different country, yeah, I didn't know what I was doing until I got on my third plane and it was the size of a bus. So, you've got a few of those moments.
Totally. Danuka is asking, did you guys take part in any extracurriculars related to environmental science, like clubs, for example? I guess back in your undergraduate days, which, as you guys have said, has been a while, but do you guys remember of any clubs or, student unions?
I'm not even sure if environmental science was two words you put together 30 years ago. So the short answer is no for that. But I look at my daughter who's in grade 12. We went to a virtual tour of one of the universities, U of T, last week to see what's happening. They have over 1,000 clubs on campus. So, I mean, there must be something for the environmental scientist group in places like that.
Yeah, I joined one in my first year. I don't even remember what it was called, but it ended up just being basically drinking in a pub every Friday night. So, but not that there's anything wrong with that.
Sounds really cool.
But I wanted to do something that, got me outside and, I thought it was going to be, help clean up the environment, go clean litter off a beach or, something like that. But it ended up they didn't do anything. So I stopped going. We had our Glasgow University Earth Science Society, which, yeah, it was basically more drinking on a Friday night. I did some volunteer work outside of university myself. There was a country park that you could volunteer to do conservation at. So I did some of that in my final year. In Canada, I volunteered for a wildlife refuge centre up in Sudbury. So, I guess I liked to do that kind of thing. It was just difficult to find something to get involved in. So good old Google will help with that one, I think.
Charlotte is asking, can a professional geoscientist complete a degree in environmental law? And would you recommend taking such a path?
If you're already a PGO and you want to do a further degree in environmental law, go ahead.
I think if your interest is there for sure, especially, environmental lawyers, I think need that kind of practical side of geoscience to become good environmental lawyers, I think. So
did we not have somebody at our symposium who was an environmental scientist and a PGO who then became a lawyer? Or yeah. I want to say we had somebody that had an I want to say it was environmental background or geology background and ended up being something else.
I know those folks are out there for sure. That's a pretty good mix, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now, personally, my path is towards environmental law. Do you find is it easy if I have an environmental science degree, is it easy to go back and train to qualify to be a PGO? Because it sounds like a popular path.
I'd say make sure you cover all your courses while you're at university, and then you can do whatever you want, basically.
True.
I mean, the worst thing is to have to go back because you missed calculus or, structural geology or something like that. If you can do that while you're at university, then, the world is your oyster afterwards.
Is the sector of environmental law, is it big for geoscientists and the field of geoscience? Do you guys work with a lot of lawyers in that regard?
I personally don't work much with the environmental side. I'm usually way before the mining part of it, but I know there's a whole I don't know how to describe it. Is it a gaggle or a group or it's huge in mining. There's a lot of environmental awareness and focus on sustainability and doing the right thing in different jurisdictions, and it's it's huge. Yeah, it's huge interest in it.
So Charlotte is saying too, so can a student majoring in environmental science complete the required courses and become a PGO?
There's no reason why they can't, as long as they make sure they cover all the courses. It all comes down to the knowledge requirements. If you cover the courses, doesn't matter what degree you specifically have. I think you have to be careful with some of the environmental science degrees, because some of them don't give you the foundation geoscience courses. So that's when people have to sometimes go back and do those courses. But if you're aware of it and that's what you want to go into, then make sure you complete them before you graduate.
The best thing you need to do is join the PGO, get on the website, and figure out if you have the right courses, and then if you're unsure, send a quick email to Ailey, and she'll tell you yes or no. It's really easy.
Great. Tanuka is asking, are there any scholarships or grants or bursaries you are aware of that students should be taking advantage of?
Well, there's professional organizations like KEGS, which is the geophysics one, the PDAC. They all have scholarships and grants and things like that I'm aware of. And those are just a couple think of off the top of my head. I mean, most of these nonprofit organizations have them. I imagine schools have them too. But yeah, they're out there. You have to work for a bit sometimes, but they're out there.
I think there is a couple of funding opportunities for masters too at University of Toronto Scarborough. So definitely ask some professors. That would be the best avenue to take with that question. They'd have a lot of information, especially for studying opportunities.
Yeah, for further degrees, in my experience, they tend to be funded, but I've gone through the geology side where a lot of them are funded by either mining companies or like the Geological Survey of Canada or the Ontario Geological Survey, or, you know, like there's some get research grants. It really depends on your supervisor, what kind of project you're doing, and if you're working for a company. Like I think you mentioned earlier, Mark, the $100 million that Laurentian got for Metal Earth projects. So anybody doing a project under Metal Earth is going to get funding. Generally, you only get funding for about 2 years for masters, and I think it's 3 for PhD. So if you go beyond that, then you're on your own. But
even companies in the industry, there's a lot of them that offer a little bit of money just to kind of keep an eye on you. Coming up to graduation time, maybe in your 4th year, they might have something to help you through. So I mean, industry as well, not just schools or nonprofits.
I'm going to put in chat to the program director for environmental geoscience at University of Toronto Scarborough. They're actually the person that got us in contact with our speakers today, Alid and Mark. So they would especially have your answer to funding opportunities for studying. But good question. Any further questions, guys?
Well, as we said, we're available. Ailey's available.
Yep.
But if she can't answer a question, she'll direct it to the right person. But she can answer every question. So.
Thanks. No pressure.
But if there's no more questions, that was really good. There's some great questions there, and as I said, this is the best part of my role as a counselor on the PGO, so doing this stuff. So